What is going on, everybody? This is Mike from The Last Corvette. So in today's video, I'm going to touch on something that I did, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, but a latest comment, which was a question, actually brings up a really good point. So this comment was left on the video that I did some time ago when I installed my head unit into my C6 Corvette and two cameras, so backup camera and a front-facing camera. So the question was, where did I source or where did I buy the cameras? Well, it's very simple, either Amazon or eBay. You don't really have to go far, right? Everything is within reach nowadays. And to start out with cameras in general, you don't want to go super cheap. It's okay to go middle of the road. You don't have to overpay for some crazy camera, right? Even OEM cameras that manufacturers use are not that great. You know, if you pay a little bit for a car, which is no such thing as a little bit nowadays, it's a little grainy. If you pay a little bit more, it's better. Stuff like that, right? And it also kind of adds to how many cameras you have in the vehicle in general. So yes, I'm not going to touch on the installation because that is C6 specific. If you want to watch what I bought, how I installed it, you can kind of scroll through this channel, pick, you know, and choose the videos you want to watch, type of thing. But we're going to focus it on cameras. So like I said, middle of the road usually is fine. Look at the reviews, look at the overall capacity of the camera. You know, is it night rated? And like I said, reviews and just comparing the product is, I think, probably the most important part. Besides trying to figure out what fits the bill, meaning that what you like and also what fits the vehicle better, location-wise, size-wise, and of course, what you're trying to achieve. There's different angles, there's different, you know, mounting setups that you can choose from. So for me personally, the backup camera that I have, I wanted to go more for a OEM look. So I didn't choose the bullet style camera like I did for the front facing camera. I wanted something that's more of a flush mount. So the camera that I chose is decent. It is a enclosed, basically in a, we'll say a square case, high gloss case that will mount flush to any surface. Okay, and of course it has to sit vertical with the post up. And if you're trying to figure out why I chose to go with the post, well, look at my videos. I explained that in detail. Now, the front facing camera that I got is a normal bullet style camera that you can use either for a front or a rear setup. Pretty straightforward. Same thing, it's rated for night, we'll say night vision or dusk type stuff. Things are greatly improved if you have good like reverse lights, LED reverse lights, or good headlights if you're actually using the camera. So, you know, those things can vary too. Trust me, there is very few cameras out there, unless they're like super expensive and you find them on high-end vehicles that will like light up the view in front of them or behind them. It's just, it doesn't work that way. Usually it's just the ambient light that's being put out by your vehicle. But there's something important about these cameras, regardless if it's a C6 Corvette or if it's any other vehicle. If you're adding a front camera, if you're just adding a backup camera, or you're adding cameras. I will touch on the head unit. So the head unit that I have has one dedicated camera input, which is a backup camera. That means that I was able to properly install one camera. So when I put in reverse, which my trigger is through my BCM, it turns the camera on. I can also trigger my cameras individually. Now, if I went with a higher end model, I could have had two dedicated cameras, and now they make them like up to 4 or 6, I believe. So you can have side cameras, whatever cameras you want. But mine has one dedicated camera. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because on my Pioneer, which I never set up just because I got used to the grid or the grids that come with the camera integrated into the camera. So that's your green zone, yellow zone, red zone, right? So be careful, you're gonna crash into something. Well, if you have dedicated ports or video inputs, you can actually adjust and set up that grid widthwise, lengthwise to your vehicle, right? And you can save it, and every time you either turn on your backup camera or your front facing camera, you'll have everything adjusted. So let's go back to the cameras. Now, each camera is technically set up to be a backup camera, and that's why it's also important to read the fine details in print. Let me give you an example. My backup camera is a backup camera. It has one option, which is a little jumper wire that you can cut to get rid of the grids that are basically built into the camera, into the view of the camera when you power up the camera, or you can leave it connected. Of course, if you do that, make sure you cut it in the middle, the way you can, splice it back in. Don't just cut it right at the harness. It will make your life a lot harder. So if I chose to, I could cut that little jumper and then set up my backup camera grids that are integrated into the Pioneer. Basically an overlay of the image that's on the screen. My front camera also came with a jumper, but there's actually two. One does the same thing. I can either show the grid or I can get rid of the grid. Obviously, I don't have anything on my front video input to dedicate it to a camera as far as a front camera, because I only have one. So I'm actually using what they call a auxiliary video input, which can be used for anything. Let's say you have a Blu-ray player or a DVD player, whatever you got, right? I don't know, some kind of a video console or something like that. So I can trigger that on, same thing at any time, and my grids are there. Now, a front-facing camera, and the easiest way to put it is, if you take a backup camera or a dedicated camera, and it's facing rear, right? And you flip it 180, all of a sudden your passenger side, okay, becomes your driver's side and passenger side. You guys follow me? So your view is basically mirrored if you get a camera that's not adjustable. So the second jumper on the camera that I chose for the front, basically that camera can be set up for the front or the rear, and it tells you in the instructions which way to cut. And if you cut it, like I said, and you cut the wrong jumper or you cut it by mistake, just make sure you do it in the middle. That way you can put it back together and create the right circuit. So what you do is you figure out if it's going to be in the front or the rear. Normally they're defaulted as a backup camera. You set it up for the front. That way, if you're looking at the screen, driver's side is driver's side, passenger side is passenger side, and it matches the view or the perspective that you're seeing out of your front window. Like I said, most of the cameras that are middle of the road will have this function, but it's something that a lot of people don't talk about, because they'll either take the vehicle to a audio video shop, a custom shop, and they'll just do it for them. But yes, there is such a thing as a mirror image, and you definitely don't want to install something or buy a camera like my backup camera, which doesn't have that option, and put it on the front, and all of a sudden you realize that, well, shoot, I'm basically looking at everything with reversed hands. Now, another thing too, on a bullet style camera, people think that, well, they can just turn the actual camera 180, which you can, but all that's gonna do is actually flip everything upside down. That is only set up to tighten up the camera and set your horizontal level on the lens itself. You can't just physically flip it over and think you're gonna switch sides. It just doesn't work like that. Now, one thing you can do, and all of the head units, especially aftermarket head units, are capable of this, is when it comes to actual triggers of the camera. For any camera, you need three things to actually make it work and make it visible, either on your stock system or your aftermarket system. It's ground and a power. So you're gonna pull power, if it's a backup camera, from something that turns on when you throw it in reverse. I chose to go with the BCM. You can also connect it to like your reverse lights, for example, and they'll do the same thing. But going back to the head units, most head units, especially aftermarket head units, will be able to trigger your backup camera, same thing with the front camera, either through a positive input or a negative input. Yes, they will look at, well, you have to figure out which input you have. Some GM vehicles and some manufacturers, instead of a 12 volt, they'll actually use ground to switch and turn things on and off. So that's number one. Number two, you obviously need to run your video input cables, which are just video RCA cables, to your head unit from the camera, okay? One thing I learned over the years dealing with audio video and running my own shop, installing them for years, is you never want to lay your power wires and either your speaker wires or your amplifier wires, your audio video wires together. So you always want to run them separate. In other words, what you want to do is very simple. Like on my car, the backup camera power wire that runs to the BCM runs the center of the vehicle. So it basically goes on to the carpeting, through the armrest, through basically middle of my dash, and it's hidden. My video input cable runs the passenger side of my vehicle, basically down the B pillar, through the trunk, down the B pillar, and then up the dash and then into the head unit. The more separation you have, the better, because what happens is if you have a kink or an insulation issue, you could potentially have buzz or fuzz or distortion. You could hear it in your speakers if it's audio, or you could see it in clarity or that white fuzz on the screen when it comes to video. So it's very, very important to keep them separate as much as you can. You don't have to run them a mile apart. We definitely want to keep them, you know, enough apart where they're not going to interfere or possibly cause issues. To end this whole thing is no install is wrong, no install is right. Like I said, you can look at my videos that I did and, you know, and just kind of judge what you want, what you like, and kind of go from there. But like I said, at the end of the day, all videos are great, but when you do it yourself for the first time, or when you start doing the research, you'll find out that number one thing to do is do your due diligence to figure out what you like, what looks best on your car or your application, and just go from there. If you want to know more, comment below and I'll make another video.